Howdy folks, BJ and the Bear here. It's been a while, but I wanted to touch base with you and do a walk around on my bike. And this basically has over 35,000 miles on it. So I wanted to just kind of review it after that 35,000 miles. And so me and the Bear here are inside the bear cave. And it's a mess now, but it's coming along. I'm just messing with it little by little. But here I just wanted to, like I said, touch base with you and basically go over my bike, what's on my bike, and how it's been treating me over the last couple of years. It's a 2018 Indian Chieftain. It's the color is called a Star Silver Smoke, and it's a flat matte paint, kind of like the Dark Horse colors, except this one has the chrome accessories with the motors and pipes and things like that. But I think the silver really sets off the chrome. It really looks good to me, and that's one of the reasons I picked it. But we'll go over real quick with what I've got. I started out, I had the Clockworks flared windshield put on. I have the lower wind deflectors put on. I've got the lower highway bars for the front and back highway bars. I've got the lower leathers put on. I've updated the grips have been updated, and I've got the pegs that match the grips. The floorboards are a premium upgrade, and I've got the passenger floorboards that match those. I've got the Captain Itch heat shield, and added the cup holder. Gotta have my cup holder, and my ram mount, which is basic stuff. I added the seat back for the driver, and then when I first picked it up, I have the sissy bar and luggage rack, but have since taken that off. I still have it, but I've added this tour pack, so when I went on my trip I had more lockable space, and I really like that. Let's see what else I got. As you can see, I've got a CB on there. We use that for our Patriot Guard rides to communicate, to make sure everybody's made it out into traffic, and also to communicate when law enforcement rides by, when they go to control the red lights and stuff on our escorts. But I've got the C-Tech add-on for my battery tender. I've got a battery tender add-on as well behind the side panel. I've got the SAE2 2-pin adapter, and I've got a cigarette 12-volt adapter also that I tied into my front auxiliary power switch or plug that I had in there. So I've got plenty of power connections. I even got one inside here that gives you a USB connection, and you can plug your flash drive and have your songs on it, or you use that flash drive to update your maps and your console software and things like that for any updates that they may have. let's see what else. I got the I had the 116 big bore kit put on when I first bought it, and they added the high flow Indian air filter. And since I did the Lloyd's 585 cams, they decatted it by putting the Reinhardt True Duals on, and it's got the Reinhardt slip-ons, and I really like the sound. To me, it's one of the best sounds. I added I've got some P3 lights that for brake lights, and that was fine, but I wanted more, so I did the General Dynamics brake flashers, and that also just lights up and flashes constantly, and I really like that. That shows up. The trunk, of course, I added the tail light back here as well. You can see I've got my CB antenna. It runs through. On a bike, you have to run a no plane antenna and cable, and it runs, and that's because you don't have enough metal on the bike to act as an antenna, so it uses all of that, and you run your cable up under your bike, your leftover cable up under your seat in a figure-8 motion, so that it can draw the the signal, and it comes all the way up to the front, and then that's where I end up running my little portable CB, and once you give it full power, it becomes a portable instead of a handheld, and so we run that. It goes to my SR10, which allows it to communicate with my Sena headset. It's got your push to talk on it. I added the love jugs because riding in the south down here, you've got, when you're going real slow and not being able to get any of the wind over your cylinder heads, those love jugs really keep those cylinders cool, and by keeping the wind flowing over the fins. I added the Buffalo brand air horn. It's a real loud air horn, and it's just so much better than the one that came with it. Okay, one of my favorite things also is the seat. This is a climate control seat. It's put out by Indian. It heats and cools. You can see there's a little spot here that you got your 2 buttons for the passenger and the rider, and up hits your heat, down hits your cool, and you got 3 positions in each, I believe. But that's a real nice seat. It's very comfortable. It's got 2 little fans inside the seat that will blow up into the bottom of the seat to create that little filament. I can't think of the name now, but it's what it uses to heat and cool that seat. And that's basically it. I can't think of anything else. It's a real quick overview of what I've got and the performance. Like I said, the 116 with the Lloyd's 585. Lloyd's did the tune. They really did a good job on tuning it. They've got to be, some of the best, because I'd had a tune that started out real bad with the shakiness and vibration, and that's because if you looked at the graph was just up and down, up and down. Well, they fixed that, and the computer went out, and they just put a stock tune on it. Well, I went to Pikes Peak, and they did a good job at tuning it, but they were at 5,000 feet. And when I came back, I said, well, I really want Lloyd to tune it. So I went back to Lloyd's. They retuned it, no problem. And the Pikes Peak did a good job tuning it, but there was just a little bit of vibration there, and they smoothed it out, so they were able to get that. And I think that was the difference between being at 5,000 feet versus being down here close to sea level. Because like I said, when I was there at Pikes Peak up there in Colorado Springs, it ran great. It was running good up there. I've got 35,700. Let's see what I got. 35,877 miles, and it. I got that because I basically, it's a daily driver for me. I ended up you know, riding it all the time. I'd rather ride it than drive my truck. And I do a lot of Patriot Guard rides and stuff like that. And I bought it last May of 2019, and ended up riding it for a year. And then in that year, I probably got between 17,000 and 18,000 miles on it. And then I went on my trip this past summer, and I did what I called my coast to coast trip to Sturgis, and where I left here out of Pensacola Beach and went to the Atlantic at Charleston, South Carolina. And then as I drove across the country, I went all the way over to Santa Monica Pier to touch the Pacific, and then I headed to Sturgis. But in doing that, as I rode across country, for instance, when I was in North Carolina, I rode as many of the good motorcycle roads through those mountains as I had time to ride. For instance, I did the Copperhead Loop. I did the Rattler 209, the 421 Snake, Little Switzerland, the Devil's Whip, the Blue Ridge Parkway, which took me from the eastern side of the North Carolina, or almost mid North Carolina, over to the western side to the Tail of the Dragon and Moonshiner 28 and the Chirrahua Skyway. And I tell you, even the roads that took you to those roads were good roads. I really enjoyed that. And I like going up there every chance I get. Coming out of that, I went through Tennessee. I went and did the Devil's Triangle. I'd heard about that, and I'm glad I did that. And then I headed straight across Tennessee over to Arkansas, and I rode as many of those roads as I could work into my path, like the Arkansas Dragon and the Pig Trail and Mount Magazine, and you know, there's several others that I worked in. I wasn't able to do all of the whole path of each one of those, but I worked in some of them at least part of the way. And then I ended up going through Oklahoma, of course Texas, and New Mexico. Went through Arizona, stayed with some family and friends, then took a side trip up to $1 Million Highway and Grand Junction, and cut across, you know, through Ouray, Grand Junction, and then cut across over to and come back down through Utah through Mexican Hat. Went to stay in Phoenix with some friends, and then kept back on Route 66 and followed that all the way out through Kingsman, Oatman, all the way to Santa Monica Pier where it ends. And that's where I got to the Pacific. And then from there we came back, went through Las Vegas, back through Utah, and I did the Zion National Park, Bryce Canyon, Capitol Reef, and then up through Salt Lake City, and then on over up into the Tetons and Yellowstone. Did the Blue Beartooth Pass as we made our way to Sturgis. stayed there for a week, and then came back through Colorado Springs, and then made my way back down through Mexico, New Mexico, and Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, and back home. It ended up being over 11,000 miles. I think it was 11,499 miles, something like that, in 49 days. And I tell you, I had such a blast doing that. I was very impressed with Utah, Million Dollar Highway, and Beartooth Pass. Beartooth Pass was by far one of my favorites of the whole trip. It was just beautiful. All of it was beautiful. I mean, this country is amazing. And but in doing that, I did have some problems. As I was going through Tennessee, getting into Arkansas, I started having some problems with my headlight. The high beam started flashing on my dash. And because it was the beginning of the weekend, the shops were closed, and I wasn't able to get to any of the shops before they closed for the weekend. And most of them are closed on Mondays. And I ended up making it to Albuquerque, and they worked me right on in. Immediately got me looked at it. They saw where my wiring harness was kind of messed up a little bit, so they cleaned that up and sent me on my way, thinking that would help. And it did for a little bit, but then it happened again. I mean, it started to happen even more. And so at that time, I just kept going and knew I was going to be getting to Sturgis, so I went ahead and made it to Sturgis, and ended up catching a nail also before I got to Sturgis. So I limped in there with a flat tire and the headlight problem. So they picked me up, worked me in, dealt with the warranty information stuff, because it ended up being my computer control module. That section of the wiring harness ended up burning up. So I ended up having to get a new computer control module and a new wiring harness. But they took care of that, worked with it, worked with headquarters and all that to get my warranty stuff straightened out. And now they were in a hurry, and there were so many people there at Sturgis, so I kind of forgive them on this. But when they went to put everything back together, they did a stock tune instead of being able to copy the tune that I had from Lloyd's, and that kind of messed the way the bike was running. And then on top of that, the knock sensor wasn't set in place properly, and it was throwing all kind of error codes. So I made it to Colorado Springs and Pikes Peak. They took me in, started analyzing everything, ended up having to do a new tune for it, and that's where they really did a good job on tuning it. And then they found out that the knock sensor was messed up, and so they made sure that was seated. And at the same time, I was having a problem with my fuel sending unit in my fuel tank, and so they looked at that and they had to order another one, so I got that one put in. And that was it. Once I got that done, that was all the issues I had. So I was able to make it on back home. But people say, well, there's not enough Indian dealers around the country, and I don't agree with that. There's some that's got fairly good distance away from each other, but that's where people are kind of sparse to begin with. And most of the time when you're riding your bike and you have a problem, it's not something that's going to make you dead in the water. It's something that you can kind of keep on going until you get to somewhere. And that's what kind of issues that I had. And so we got that taken care of, and I got back, and like I said, it was a grand trip. I mean, I think it passed the test on being able to get around. My bike has been doing great ever since, and I just love it. This bike, when I get off of it, I tell people, so when I get off of it, I just want to get right back on it. I just love riding it that much. And it is by far one of the, out of the few that I've had, this is by far just so enjoyable to ride. As far as my Indian goes, I love it. I'll probably end up keeping this bike for a while. That new Challenger came out, and yeah, I'd like to have something like that, but I've got so much already invested in this, it wouldn't do me right to trade or anything. So, and I'm perfectly happy with this thing. So I think it's just a beautiful bike to look at. It's I've always liked that Indian style with that flare front fender. Some people don't like it. I do. It's just a good bike. So anyway, it's Brian, BJ, and the bear in the bear cave. So we'll catch y'all in the future. So y'all come back when y'all can stay longer. You hear?